Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today.
Okay, thank you so much. For those of you who've never joined any of our master classes, if you have a question or a comment, just type it in the chat area and I'll take that. So if Gregory, if you can come back on, turn on your video and your audio, we can get this started. I'm really thrilled that we have one of my favorite ESG mega nerds, who's one of the few analysts who's been in the space over 25 years and knows a lot about getting that information that we're all trying to acquire, and is also quite critical of the present state of affairs, but he does have also solutions. So Gregory, for those of you that are not familiar with who you are and what you do, briefly tell everyone, a little bit about yourself, and then go into the presentation. So I will go on mute and I will turn off my video.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks to all of you for attending, and thanks in advance for your question. I'm Grégory Schneider-Maunoury. I got in sustainable investment 25 years ago. Before I did a PhD on environmental regulation and corporate strategies. So I know in 25 years, I know the problems and solutions of this business, its risk and opportunities. I've worked along the whole value chain, starting in CSR rating agency, as it was named at that time, ARES. So ARES was the kind of a very cooperative, entrepreneurial, first French CSR rating agency. Then, well, we have known quickly about capitalism. We have been merged and acquired by a project called Vigeo. Vigeo was fairly different. Then I moved to asset management at Candriam, where I've known people who are still in the business, such as Roland Kulch, or close from the business as Wim Vermeer. Then I went back to France to discover sell side, so broker research related to ESG. And then I went back to asset management for a long period, for a long time, more than a decade, as the head of SRI of Humanis, gestion d'actifs, and we had two, well, with my team, we had two great satisfaction. First, the development of impact companies fund called Fonds Solidaires in France. We've multiplied by 2 or 3, if I remember, the amount of assets under management in this category. And the second great satisfaction was the creation and development of a green bond fund. So my company was a very traditional asset management French company, rather conservative. When in 2015, I started to build up, I proposed and I designed a green bond fund. It was considered as, okay, a fashion. We won't put more than 40 million euros, but with relevant investment choice and good use of indicators, we went from 40 million euros to 400 million euros. And this very small company happened to be the third manager of a green bond fund in Europe by the size of the assets, assets under management. Then after such a long time in asset management, I really wanted to do something for the business because I clearly understood that there was a failure in this sustainable finance market, and there was a need to correct this failure, to put bridge where we have Canadian. And after entrepreneurial transition by joining the executive committee of Finance, I decided to go totally on my own and to build up this consulting company, Défi Impact. I'm also associate professor at University Sorbonne Paris Nord, so in northern suburbs of Paris. And in 5 years, we have built up our master in sustainable finance in the top 5 of sustainable finance, master in sustainable finance in France. What else? Despite being a guy from the operational side, from the analysis, I've also the opportunity to be a member of the Sustainable Finance Committee of AMF, so the French Authority of Control of the Financial Market. And I'm also member of the Scientific Committee of FAIR. Why Scientific Committee? Because as an associate professor, I'm producing a lot of research, and I'm not only providing solution as a consultant, but I am also trying to spread applied research that could be useful for sustainable finance market. So maybe now I'm going to share screens. Where was it? Yeah, there it is. So here on this first slide, you can see my previous and present activities. And as I mentioned, as an associate professor, I'm also fairly active in research, and I try to pre-publish most of my research on SSRN. So maybe to start, I would like to make a short introduction to ESG and sustainable finance that would also explain as Robert mentioned, my view on the sustainable finance market and what we could or what we should do to improve this market.
Can you also
First,
do full screen of the,
oh,
that
sorry.
that's okay.
There it is. To start very simply, we all have heard about this strange word of acronym soup, accusations that come from a country that is not very well known for gastronomy. So as I shared with some Japanese investor, country that is, as France, known for its subtle gastronomy, let's put the ingredient in the right way and see whether it's such a soup of acronym. First, you have SRI, social responsible investment, sustainable finance. That's the aim of the analysis, the objectives that we have. Then you have the object of the analysis, CSR, CSR of different companies, company 1, 2, 3, N. And in the middle, you have ESG criteria that are means, that are tools of analysis of CSR, CSR strategies of the company. And you have one more subtlety. We have to make sure when we analyze the CSR strategy of companies that this CSR is related to sustainable development, which hasn't been always the case in previous years. So first, a short remembrance of the heterogeneity of ESG rating compared to financial rating. But again, let's put some order on the table before using the ingredients. The credit rating, it's something clearly defined. Credit rating assesses the probability of default. And you can see that when the rating, in that case, credit rating is defined, well, the methodology are rather homogeneous. As some slight differences between Moody's, Fitch, and S&P, still there is some homogeneity. On the left side of the slide, you can see ESG rating. And sorry, I cut the table and I also cut the reference. That's something that was mentioned in the survey of OECD, ESG policies, context, and opportunities, something like that. It was a document published by two main OECD researchers, Bofo and Patalano, in 2020. Here you can see on the left side of the slide that ESG rating is totally heterogeneous. It's not that, well, the blue square provider would be peculiarly generous in its rating, because, okay, they provide the best score for Ecolab and quite for Amazon, but you can see that they are more critical, among the most critical, for Walmart, Exxon, and Berkshire Hathaway. No, the real problem, it's not that one would be kinder or more advanced. The real problem is heterogeneity. We don't know what we assess in ESG rating. And the EU Commission was close to say that, well, ESG rating is not a rating, because as long as ESG rating is not the assessment of a probability of known achievement of a specific environmental performance or of a specific social performance, it's not a rating. It's an addition of ESG scoring, either ESG transparency scoring or ESG impact aggregate scoring or ESG financial materiality aggregated scoring, but it's not a rating. A rating in finance, on financial market, it's a probability of achievement or of known achievement of something. So why is this? Well, simply because we know for pretty long that in this ESG rating process, you have different objects of analysis, activities, practices, processes, sometimes long-term performance, and you have different methods. Is it compliant or not with the regulation? Second method widely used, consider any CSR or sustainable development related issues as a management system. And so you rate your management system. You rate the planning, you rate the implementation, you rate the audit and control, and you rate the results. So plan, do, check, act, or policy, process, performance. But it's a different method. It's not, is it compliant or not? It's how is the management system developed on this issue? Third method, risk opportunity analysis. Is it a risk? How much is the company exposed? And how well does the company manage the risk? Fourth method, still poorly or insufficiently used, scenario. But the only way to assess long-term performance is to use scenario. So that explains why it's different. And when I say that it's really not new, well, okay, this specific table has been published in 2023. Okay, but it was only an adaptation of from a chapter of a book that I wrote in 2006, so in 2006. And at that time I was starting in the business, so I wasn't extremely creative or inventive. I was clearly inspired by the work of 2005, made by Valérie Lucas-Leclerc and Jean-Philippe Desmartins, notably, among others. And this work by Lucas-Leclerc and Desmartins was clearly based on the work of Margolis and Walsh in 2001. So we know for very long why ESG scoring differ. What we have known more recently is what do these difference bring in the or how could this difference be measured? If you remember the seminal work of Florian Heeb and Julian Kolbel, and were maybe associated with Rigaud and maybe Berg, they measured the difference, and they said in the seminal work on ESG aggregate confusion, they clearly said and measured that difference in object represent 60% of the divergence of ESG scoring, and the difference in method represent 30%. Okay, fine, perfect. Now, what can we do and how can we get out of this mud? Well, first we have European regulation. European regulation with taxonomy and CSRD not only add a constraint to companies, but clearly redefined corporate social responsibility. Before the European regulation on sustainable finance, corporate social responsibility would be defined by the two questions, whether and how. And at the time when this was published in 2003 by Craig, it was the construction of an academic consensus on CSR. CSR would be the intent to go beyond regulation and the explanation of this intent and its implementation. Great, perfect. For an academic consensus, really perfect. For ESG professional, as and sustainable finance professional, a nightmare. What sustainable finance regulation brings is a new definition of CSR. The CSR is no more defined by the question whether and how, but two very different questions, what and when. What is your environmental performance and when will you achieve it? So you can easily understand, looking at this table, that with the European regulation, the assessment of long-term performance would be way easier, because at least for green issues, we have targets that company should achieve. And we could say, well, will the company be able to achieve this target in 2023, in 2035? Will the company be able to achieve the sustainable contribution threshold for this category of taxonomy? Or wider, and we would come back to that later, will the company be able to achieve its target on climate transition plan? So it's not only for taxonomy performance assessment, it can go to larger issues. So definitely my recommendation is, if we want sustainable finance to survive, well, we have to build up funds with clear target and clear results for the rest of the population. And we have to refocus the ESG analysis on long-term performance using scenarios. Scenarios, they're not that complicate. It's only a detailed, refined way of what Valérie Lucas-Leclerc called the extra financial analysis, that is, a delayed and hierarchized view on the company. So this is a way I see the mess of sustainable finance and how to get out of the mess. Maybe you have some question on this before I come to the solution that I propose.
I think people are marketing themselves more than actually asking questions about it. But so we have an extractive audience that is trying to suck something out of someone else. But go ahead.
Okay. So
Seem to have lost you. Sorry about that. Let me find that. Why is he not here? I guess you're going to have to log in again.
okay.
There we go.
Yeah,
You're back.
I'm in.
Okay.
I'm in. So sorry. I'm gonna share again. Yep. Is that? Yep. That's it. Okay. Sorry. Sorry for technical problem. Three solutions to get out of this mess. First, tax optimization risk. Good example, because we are often accused in ESG analysis not to produce anything, not to dig deep enough. And in that case, tax optimization risk problem lies also in the financial analysis. Second example would be indirect water consumption. And third example, climate transition plan. So let's dig in tax optimization risk. Roger Bregman, Dutch philosopher and historian, if I remember.
Rutger Bregman. Rutger, not Roger. Rutger.
Oh, he called the issue of tax. He called it in the Davos Forum the elephant in the room of sustainable finance. And it's true that we've been shy so far on this issue, and we've been shy because, notably because we were maybe a bit too much marked by the moral or religious origin of the motivation of some of the responsible investors. So we thought, okay, it's a practice that maybe we should condemn. So we should ask for charter not to do it. Well, nice try, but short is not long enough. The issue of tax optimization, it's not a business good or bad practice. It's a risk continuum. So it's a business strategy. And as a business strategy, it generates a risk continuum. So there was huge, this idea of considering it as a business strategy and a risk continuum. It's not my opinion. It's what the academic research has already stated, demonstrated, written, and some things that we can build on. So now the question is, okay, how to assess this continuum? One indicator is not enough. Retreating, torturing one indicator wouldn't go very further. So my proposal is to use 3 indicators, and 3 indicators that are not in supplementary questionnaire, 3 indicators that are already in the books. So I propose to use effective tax rate, which is the level of tax rate paid by the company for continuing activities. The deferred tax versus income tax, it's kind of flow-based measurement of the use of deferred tax. And deferred tax assets versus total assets, which is a stock-based measurement of the use of deferred tax. So the idea is not only to focus on one ratio 1 year, but to look at the impact of tax avoidance, tax optimization on the balance sheet. So we have one P&L in the measurement, deferred tax versus income tax, and one balance sheet indicator, deferred tax assets versus total assets.
Gregory, there was one question about the tax thing by Martin. He was asking, given that there is now an agreement of a global minimum tax, why do you consider the tax payments are still an issue?
Excellent question. The agreement regards the use of tax haven, where you don't pay anything. If you can put part of your income in this tax haven through some transfer price, smart transfer price, where you wouldn't pay anything. Okay, but in some sectors, in some countries, you don't pay tax. And it's not only, I'm not talking about Bermuda, because now even in Bermuda, you pay 15%. I'm talking about UK and France on commercial real estate. You can pay a 0 tax on commercial real estate in France and UK. It's legal. It's not a trick. It's not illegal. It's legal that there is this kind of subsidy to retail by providing this commercial real estate specific tax haven. And you have plenty of reason, R&D support, clean energy support, recognition of previous losses that would lead your company to be able to present lower tax. And still today, you have, and that's what we're going to see, maybe I can go there already. You can see here some results of effective tax rate. So in 2021, so you can see that in 2021, 36% of DG30 was under 15% rate of income tax. 36%. Well, Europe could say, oh, we are way better on tax. Still, 15% in 2021, but 20, and yeah, I think it's still what I looked at in 2023, it was still something in between 10 and 15. So it's still possible to pay less tax than the minimum tax rate in any country. Notably,
Just one addition question that Martin
Yeah.
had is that he's saying, yes, but this is the issue of subsidies. Are subsidies considered in the ETR? Are subsidies included in the ETR?
oh, when I said subsidies, it's because you can have tax abatement when you invest in renewable. And some of your revenue can be considered tax-free in some sectors. If a government wants to help or to push one sector, he can say, okay, your income in this sector would be tax-free. So OECD strong commitment is a nice political announcement, but in the reality, it's a bit more complex. Does this fully answer to your question?
Not sure. Yes, it does.
Okay. So you have the effective tax rate and a second material issue is deferred tax assets versus total assets. And you can see the results in 2023 of deferred tax assets versus total assets. 20% of stocks 50 Europe has over 5% of its balance sheet as tax-related intangibles. Now you could say, okay, 5% intangibles. Well, it's not, it's a very specific intangibles. It's tax-related intangibles. And I mean, I see my work as very amoral, out of moral issues. So I'm not specifically saying and stigmatizing, saying, oh, tax-related intangibles, not possible. No. It's just that when you have more than 5% of your balance sheet of tax-related intangibles in a period of budget uncertainty and necessity in Europe to reduce the budget deficit, well, maybe you can raise some questions about the relevance and the long-term continuation of these tax-related intangibles. I mean, again, no moral issue. If there is a strong R&D production, and so the country would protect somehow by using tax rebate the R&D production of a company, and the fact that the company is irrigating the whole sector in a country and having partnerships with universities, having cooperations with a large set of startups, no problem. But we only have ASML in that case. And frankly, I would fully understand, I have fully back policy, fiscal policy of Netherlands towards ASML, no problem. But when I say 10% of stocks 50 Europe is over 5% of deferred tax assets over total assets without R&D production. It means that there are 5 companies not producing any real specific R&D that are on bail of the government somehow by this hard use of deferred tax assets. And again, I'm not saying, well, we have a new issue. It's like the fiscal problem of some companies of the past. Remember Parmalat. I remember this fantastic German company with huge contracts in Singapore, and who had this accounting hole related to 1 billion in Malaysia that was lost in the Malaysian forest. No, it's not one case in 10 years. It's 20% of stocks 50 Europe. So it's a risk. It's a significant risk that is borne by many investors. Okay, so now what are the potential improvement of these first results? First, need to work on longer time series. And this would join a reflection on other ESG issues. Instead of saying your result in terms of effective tax rate, deferred tax assets is not or is risky this year, might be interesting to look at the trend, 5 years trend that we can detect, because maybe there are cycles. You have 1 year with lower performance, and then it takes 1, 2, 3, potentially 5 years to come back to a more decent tax rate.
One question, do you consider, again from Martin, do you consider upstream tax payments in the ETR? If not, why?
May I ask you to repeat the question, Robert?
Sure. Do you consider upstream tax payments in the ETR? If not, why?
Upstream tax payment. What do you mean by upstream tax payments?
Tax payment for by suppliers, sorry.
I don't think so. I use the effective tax rate disclosed by the company. I don't think it integrates what the suppliers pay. It's only the effective tax rate of the company.
Okay.
And in the effective tax rate of the company, you have long-term analysis. So this trend over 5 years, you have this balance sheet perspective, but you have also short-term analysis with the understanding of the reason of the difference between theoretical tax rate and effective tax rate, including the hedging results, including the carry loss forward. But it's also, okay, you had a loss, but are you sure this loss would generate in the end a positive income? Or is it just, well, a loss? It's a loss. There's no reason that it would be a compensation, mitigation of future tax payments.
Okay.
And then what we could do, and it's also trying to use a concept of financial materiality, but also impact materiality. We can have discussion and quantitative analysis of the financial materiality, such as the effective tax rate and the deferred tax assets over total assets. But the one of the ratio, the one called deferred tax on income tax, could be also integrated in the assessment of internal audit as a proxy of governance quality. How much the books are cooked or rewarmed. It's kind of because the tax issue, it's a kind of microwave warming. You prepared your thing, but then you say, okay, now I have to warm it. Let's put it sometime in the microwave. So it's also something, it says something about the quality of the data provided by the company. Second issue.
I have another
Yeah.
question. Sorry. Aaron Tate wanted to know, are there ways to aggregate the environmental, social, and governance that the global population experienced by offsetting these liabilities with the use of the markets and commodities and futures similar to disaster bonds? This would probably be a quasi-insurance product, but perhaps a better approach to FEMA coming in to cut a check for loss of lives and property, a Band-Aid approach versus something with a much longer time horizon. Did you understand the question?
Kind of. Well, I would provide a first answer, and if it's
how to offset negative externalities through financial innovation.
Maybe what we could do for that is to try to evaluate a bit more the negative and positive and potentially positive externality, and use the social impact contract, which is a tool of the government. And you can say, okay, the government doesn't have the money to pre-finance something that would help to reduce environmental or social externalities, but the government can recognize, assess, and measure the potential effects of mitigation effort that could be pre-financed by investors and then paid back by the government, because the government would have much less expenses.
There was actually an interesting idea out of Australia that they made an agreement with a sovereign, let's say the UK, and they say, we will train or retrain all of the unemployed people, or a large number, for a new position. And that tax savings, because these people were on the dole, that tax savings, we will get compensated. It's a kind of pay for social performance by saving on the taxes. It's a complicated agreement. It took a long time, but there was a fund actually doing that in Australia.
Well, the tool is the social impact contract. That's what Sir Ronald Cohen has launched with the reinsertion of people formerly in jail. But that's the problem that we have on this type of contract is we need more innovation and courage, because I am actually starting to work on a project of a social impact contract that would have a direct impact on life savings, on saving lives, sorry.
Right.
And this kind of contract needs to be developed, needs to be spread, needs to be well known, and then that's a very good way to get the sustainable finance out of its technocratic ghetto, I would say. So, now if I go to indirect water, no, maybe I would go to climate transition plan because it's
Okay.
a bit more important. For the one interested in indirect water, it's published on SSRN, and I could forward you the version published as a research article
Great.
a few weeks
Great.
ago.
I will share that. If you
Climate
send me
transition plan.
the deck, I'll share it with the people who registered.
Yeah, climate transition plan. The funny thing is that in the analysis of climate transition plan, you have some sort of echo of ESG general analysis, because you have different objects of analysis, you have different method of analysis, and for sure, and that's what was brilliantly demonstrated by the alignment cookbook #1 and #2, published by Institute Louis Bachelier. Well, you have a kind of a mess of assessment. Some saying, yeah, it's going to be not aligned, it's going to be 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees. And the problem is, it's strongly depends on the assumption that you have in your model. And it's also strongly depends on the disclosure of the company. So here you can see on the left bottom part of the slide, you have the Climate Action 100 Plus, which is a transparency check. MSCI, let's say, with 81 data points, we treat the issue. Well, 81 data points, it means that you're going to favor the big companies that are able to provide 81 data points. Then you have the ACT method as totally different grounds, way more technical. But the problem is that they don't have enough data to really provide this assessment. And then you have a kind of French SIF, half transparency, half performance analysis, notably used for the sound climate in France and now in Europe. What we propose is to reconsider, okay, what can we analyze and how can we analyze it? What can we analyze? We can analyze the probability of achievement of a climate transition plan. And we can analyze the capacity of this climate transition plan to contribute to a democratic debate on climate change. So in order to assess very precisely this, the ability for climate transition plan to contribute to the debate on climate change, we use a condition of communicative action, authentic communication provided by the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas. He considered 4 conditions: understandability, exhaustivity, reliability, verifiability. And then we had a first operationalization using a byproduct of a research made by a commission of the French Authority of Market Control, considering that there are 5 parts in the assessment: the net zero pledge, decarbonization strategy with action investment plan, phasing out of fossil fuel, transparency, and governance. And we just broke down the 30 question of this 5 and here 4 parts of the assessment framework to have a few questions on understandability, as Habermas described it as the precondition of the other 3, and then significant breakdown of the question between exhaustivity, reliability, and verifiability. It's interesting because you can see that on this result on 2023, the understandability precondition is rather stringent, with 4 out of 8 on the sound climate group that pass the threshold, 17 out of 23 on the CDPA sample, and 9 out of 21 of the CAC 40, if we accept the financial companies. So it's rather stringent, this understandability criteria, but it's also interesting to see that, well, those 4 conditions should be fulfilled. And it's not only one scoring, it's something a bit more complex that's unable to assess not only the communication, but also the real action of the company. And maybe to illustrate that, in the understandability, we use the question such as, do you have a 2023 targets? Okay, it's nice to say that you're going to be net zero in 2050. But the one who says that would be dead or out of the company, and the chairman of the company would be dead or out of the company as well. And then for understandability, we have 3 very basic questions. Okay, you say you're going to be net zero, but do you have a target for 2030? Can you make sure that your emission peak will be before 2025? And do you have a detailed action plan with investment plan? If we don't have this, I mean, what kind of climate transition plan can we have?
There
So the
was a
interesting
question
thing
from
Yeah.
Aaron. He wanted to suggest something. If we focus on measuring the delta, does that not provide the initial spark or incentive for all companies to move forward? It would possibly look like saying it doesn't matter where your ESG standards are right now, but you will receive an incentive for any positive performance toward ESG and sustainability.
What do you mean the delta?
The performance. Okay.
If I understand
What's the
your
French
question,
word for delta?
it
Change in
means that the
value.
delta would be to
Change in
focus on
value.
the understandability questions.
Change in value from time to time, to keep it simple. The change in value.
Oh, on that point, you're right. That's assessment scheme that was built up in 2023. I guess the scale, it's so far I collected the data for 2024, and I'm now adjusting the scale. I guess the scale would become more stringent in 2024 than in 2023. And again, even more stringent within 1 year. Because we are talking about contribution to consensus. And this consensus is going better and encompass more issues month after month, year after year. So definitely the scale of these conditions should be modified, improved, and made more stringent year after year. But the idea remains the same. We assess the ability or the probability of a climate transition plan to contribute to the consensus on climate change by using the 4 conditions of Habermas, meaning one condition, one precondition of understandability, and 3 other conditions: exhaustivity, reliability, verifiability. And if I may, how to use it, because that was the title of my intervention, so I would like to conclude on as is how to use it. We can use it in strategic analysis, trying to understand which carbon strategy are misleading, too little or too late. We can also use it as portfolio screening, companies not fulfilling the different conditions. And I would say it's not the same not to fulfill or not to fulfill the understandability condition, which refer to, okay, a general level of a general lack of maturity on this issue, and to not to fulfill the verifiability condition, which could refer to the quality, the assertion, the verifiability, the quality of the data, whereas credibility is more the quality of the asset. And so we can make portfolio screening, saying, okay, what companies, what part of companies do not achieve the precondition, what part of companies do not achieve the exhaustivity condition, and so might have consequence on their growth rate, what part of company do not achieve the credibility condition and might have consequence on their asset quality, and the verifiability, which could be referred to actualization rate. Proposing this equivalence means that it's not only, okay, one score that you do, and after you can show it to your client, nice if he buys it, nothing for you if the client doesn't buy it. But it's more something that you can even assess, integrate in your financial analysis, because growth rate, asset quality, actualization rate are element of a discount cash flow. So 2 different use, either as a proxy of a probability of achievement of a real climate transition plan, relevant climate transition plan, or direct integration into the financial modeling. that was the last and main point on which I would like to conclude, but I'm ready to answer to your question.
Well, we've had several questions over here. If you can turn off the presentation or
Sure.
remove the share screen. Are there any other questions? Because I apologize, we've gone a little bit over time, and I tried to keep it to 1 hour. Let me just turn this off. Hang on 1 second, my apologies. Everybody is coming over here. So these were the two that were the most active on the question area, Aaron and Martin, my other two friendly nerds in this space. If you have any specific question, you can just unmute and pose the questions there. I think I unmuted Martin, and Aaron, I've asked you to unmute. There we go. No, all right. Did you have any? Let's see. It's super interesting. Looking forward to recording. Any questions that you had that we didn't cover?
For me, it would be interesting a bit more like to understand I understand you had like a little bit of an assessment where you assess the different approaches. To my understanding, the biggest issue is that the data that the companies report is not necessarily complete. I mean, we don't have to talk about accuracy if the data is incomplete. But to my understanding, most assessment models don't really cover that, or they do some funny ways of covering it, which doesn't make any sense. So I think that's one big issue. I'm not sure to what extent you cover that.
Well, that's an excellent point. It's true that we still need more information from companies, but sometimes it's not more information. Sometimes it's information that reveals that there is need of more action from the company. And the idea of this assessment framework is that we're not only talking about transparency, for sure, we have transparency bias, but we're not only talking about transparency, we are also talking about quality of information and somehow the understanding of quality of action of the company. And that's why I mentioned that there's a kind of a move from assessment of probability of achievement of climate transition plan towards assessment of the contribution of this climate transition plan to consensus on climate change.
You talk about consensus on climate change. I'm not so sure if that is if this is really existent. I mean, there's a bunch of self-declared experts then run after IEA scenarios, which is complete bollocks in my view. So I wouldn't call it the consensus that the global economy should develop like a bunch of scientists would like it to develop, or they think it's going to develop. So what I'm missing also is the question of what is the quality, not only that if you have a transition plan and some have poor transition plans, I fully agree. The question is, so what? I mean, is this any good? Is the transition plan any good? Is it better than the comparison? Just take SBTI as an example. SBTI, if you did nothing for decades, you get a bonus because you have to reduce the same amount in percent to the ones that did everything for decades. Yeah, you did nothing for decades. You can say, oh, I'm going to reduce by 50%. And the others that did something for decades, they have to say, oh, I'm going to reduce by 20%. I'm going to be better than the other one, but the other one's going to be celebrated because they have the 50% reduction. Yeah. We estimated, we assessed the DAX 40 and we looked at the data they disclosed. And the top shot was Porsche. They said they did report their scope 3 emissions. They reported business travel. They did not report the purchased goods and services. Disclaimer, this was for 2022, right? So we estimated their scope 3 emissions. We estimated their water impact, their health impact, their biodiversity impact, all kinds of impacts. And we ended up assessing that they only disclose and report 1% of the impacts they generate.
That's a classic of ESG disclosure. Maybe you're gonna find more answer to your question in the publication on SSRN that should come in a few days now. I submitted to SSRN, so it's going to be accessible. We're not in capacity to recalculate. We are in capacity to check whether the climate transition plan that is disclosed, that is announced, is consistent with this idea of organized transition of the NGFS, saying, oh, it's going to be orderly transition.
But I'm sorry,
well,
this is centrally planning economy.
Yeah. But on some climate transition plan, we can say, well, this climate transition plan wouldn't fit into this idea of orderly transition plan because they expect a new technology in 2035, and if that technology happens, well, they're gonna have a solution, but up till 2035 they don't go far enough. And that's the kind of thing that we can say.
And the whole thing is, and the madness is that investors use these kind of models to evaluate the transition plans of the assets, right? And if it's aligned, they think, okay, it's fine, right? And if it's not aligned, they think it's not fine. Do you really think that if we get to a carbon price, that a cement company will get a lower price than a telecommunications company? Because at the moment, they have a bigger share of the pie of the global emissions.
Mm-hmm.
Of course not.
I think if you tied it to like a municipal security where you said, okay, you're going to get a couple basis points for kind of meeting these standards, a couple basis points in the muni market is a pretty hefty thing, but it would be similar to what cities do at the local level to incentivize sports teams to locate there. They say, we'll sell you the land for $1. Please come here. So it would be interesting if that kind of created a competition between cities to attract the most talent, give a couple basis points for meeting certain expectations, and that's a real quantifiable value that can flow through to the investors. That's the only thing that I've come across.
Absolutely, yeah. But the question is, what is the business calculation rationale behind the institution that provides these basis points, benefits, bonus malus system? It needs to be based on some form of a risk opportunity evaluation. And if the risk opportunity evaluation considers that a cement company, just because they have a bigger chunk of the CO2 emissions, will for some reason, have to pay less for the carbon emissions of the future, then the whole exercise is from the lender point of view, complete misincentivized, and it does not provide any incentive of competition between sectors. Let me give you a very concrete example. Do you really think that in 2050 we should be building as many houses as we do now, and we should be building those houses with concrete, or should we rather build those houses with wood? Do we need the
I
amount
fully
of cement?
no, wait, Martin. I fully agree with you that if we want to achieve this idea of net zero 1.5, we have to go way beyond changing some technologies and doing exactly the same thing, producing the same sector.
Exactly.
That's clear. What I can do with my model is to say, and it's something that I didn't insist on in the presentation, is to say, okay, for you, the investor, what we can say with this model is whether this company is doing greenwashing, and so is putting your allocations in between companies and sector into shambles, or enables you to channel your allocation towards a probable path. That's the real results that we achieve. Using Habermas model, this idea of contribution. So in case all the conditions are fulfilled, we can say, okay, there's contribution to public debate. In case it's not, it's simply greenwashing. So the investors could say, okay, if it's this company is doing greenwashing, well, we should say to this company, in 1 year, 2 years, we might disinvest, or we might ask you to change totally your plan because so far it goes nowhere. But we try to say it in a polite way so that everyone adhere to it, instead of saying, well, you're all bullshit, it goes nowhere, and let's go with AC/DC Highway to Hell.
I'm curious, is there any research or ideas created around penalizing some of the really horrific actors? Martin, you were mentioning cement versus wood. There's another Frenchman named Davidovich, who developed something called geopolymer cement, which doesn't produce any CO2 emissions. It uses slag and fly ash and salt water, doesn't burn, and 3 times stronger. Amazing. However, they've been stopped for 30 years from developing it by the cement cartel, to the point that even BASF tried to bankrupt them in the courts, because this cement is much stronger, so it's ideal for wind turbines because the foundation is much stronger. But there's no analysis of really those horrible actors who've kept climate getting worse by blocking other initiatives. It's only anecdotally that people know about that. True story. Look it up, geopolymer.org, for the nerds of you.
A really valuable thing to leave with, because honestly, it goes back years, decades, or even centuries. I think the one that I always go back to, I was working for a major telecom company, and I think it's AT&T versus a cattle rancher who had basically hooked a line to the telephone line so that he could call from the field back home. And I think they just sued him out of existence because it eventually became what the landline would be. And it was using something that they considered their own, not public good. So Robert's case is good, but I just have a faith that there's Sherman antitrust watchdogs that are taking care of that. Maybe it's a bad assumption, but
No, it was
I've other
actually
example. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Robert.
no. The person who was being sued by BASF was the person who had speaker right from the House of Representatives. I don't know if you remember, that was quite a while ago. He was kicked out of the House. He was the whistleblower on him. So he's very principled, but he's never been able to get geopolymer off the ground because the cement cartel has been blocking them, and they have more resources. I'm going to have to wrap this up because we're a bit over time. Thank you so much for your feedback. The replay will be available very quickly, and I'll send a copy. If you send me your deck, Gregory, I'll add that to those so they can look at that, and I'll add your contact details in LinkedIn so they can follow up. But thank you all very much for coming. Great job. Thank you for your feedback, Martin, as always. And Aaron, travel safely. And I'll see if I can find a room for your daughter, Gregory.
Thanks a lot, Robert, for the invitation and for my daughter. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks for
stay
your
well.
remarks, Aaron.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.